We can't afford Christmas this year, Camila. My mother said it so softly I almost felt guilty for sounding disappointed. Things are just too hard right now. Then 3 hours later, I watched my brother live stream a luxury Christmas party from her house while I sat alone eating instant noodles in the dark because I was trying to save electricity. "Turn the camera around, Brandon," somebody yelled in the video, laughing. And when he did, I saw my mother standing beside a 12-foot Christmas tree holding a champagne glass in a brand new emerald velvet dress I knew she couldn't afford. Then someone off-screen asked, "Wait, where's Camila?" And my mother smiled before saying, "Oh, sweetheart, she wouldn't really fit this crowd." I don't think I've ever felt a room go cold through a phone screen before. Before I tell you what happened next, if this story speaks to your heart, or if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and leaving a comment telling me where you're watching from and what your local time is right now, but only if this story truly resonates with you. My name is Camila Rages. I'm 34 years old, and the Christmas my family canceled because we were broke was the night everything I believed about them finally cracked open. It started 2 days before Christmas Eve, while freezing rain tapped against the windows of my apartment in Milwaukee. My apartment wasn't terrible, but it always felt colder than it should have in December. The building was old, the radiators hissed like they were dying, and the draft near the kitchen window made the cheap blinds sway every few minutes. I was sitting cross-legged on the couch, with my laptop balanced on a throw pillow, reviewing invoices for a small bookkeeping client who still hadn't paid me for November. The glow from the spreadsheet reflected off the half-empty ramen cup beside me. My phone buzzed. "Mom." I answered immediately because I always answered immediately. "Hey," I said. "Hi, sweetheart." Her voice had that tired softness she used when she wanted something. "Listen, I talked to Brandon and Sophie, and we think it might be best to skip Christmas this year." I looked toward the tiny artificial tree sitting beside my TV. I'd bought it 5 years ago at Walgreens after Christmas for $14. One string of white lights blinked unevenly around it because half the bulbs were dead. "Skip it?" I asked quietly. "Money's just tight, honey." I heard cabinet doors opening in the background. The electric bill alone is almost $400 this month. We're all struggling. I pressed my fingers against my forehead. I could help a little after Friday. No, she sighed dramatically. "You already do too much." The thing about my mother was that she always said things that sounded loving right before making you feel responsible anyway. "How bad is it?" I asked. There was a pause just long enough to make me nervous. "Honestly," she whispered, "we might lose power after New Year's if I can't catch up." I stared at the blinking lights on my tiny tree. "Okay," I said finally. "I'll send something tonight. Camila." Her voice cracked slightly. "I don't know what we'd do without you." That sentence used to mean something to me. 2 hours later, I transferred $600 from my savings account to hers. My savings dropped below $1,000 for the first time in years. I remember standing in my kitchen afterwards, staring at the refrigerator because there was almost nothing inside except almond milk, mustard packets, expired yogurt, and leftover takeout rice in a plastic container. I told myself it was temporary. Families helped each other. That's what I'd believed my entire life. Brandon texted me later that night. "Mom says Christmas is canceled. Kinda depressing, lol." I stared at the message for a second before typing back, "Yeah, maybe next year." He heart-reacted the message and never responded again. The next morning, I walked 3 blocks through slush to pick up an extra freelance shift, helping a tax preparer organize receipts before year-end filings. My boots leaked near the toes, and by the time I got there, my socks were damp and freezing. But all day I kept thinking about my mom sitting in a dark house worried about utility bills, and somehow that hurt more than the cold. Around 7 p.m., Christmas Eve, I microwaved ramen and turned off every light except the one over the stove to keep my electric usage down. Outside my apartment window, the neighborhood glowed gold and red from Christmas decorations. I could hear muffled laughter through the walls from the family next door. Somebody upstairs was playing Sinatra Christmas songs too loudly. "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas" drifted through the ceiling while steam fogged my microwave door. Then my phone buzzed with a notification. Brandon Reyes started a live video. I almost ignored it. Almost. But something in my stomach tightened before I even opened it. And the second the screen loaded, I realized my mother had lied to me about everything. The live stream shook slightly as Brandon walked through the house holding his phone above his head like he was documenting some celebrity event instead of our family Christmas party. Music blasted somewhere near the kitchen. Somebody was laughing hard enough to snort. I recognized the dining room immediately because I had spent half my childhood sitting at that scratched oak table doing homework while my mother balanced overdue bills beside the salt shaker. Except now, the table was covered in catered trays, gold candles, and crystal glasses I had never seen before. "Yo, show the desserts again," one of Brandon's friends shouted. Brandon turned the camera toward a 6-foot dessert display lined with tiny cheesecakes and chocolate-covered strawberries. "Mom went crazy this year," he laughed. My stomach tightened so hard I had to set the ramen cup down on the coffee table. The steam had already disappeared from the noodles. I remember staring at those strawberries, because when we were kids, strawberries were something my mother bought one container at a time and cut carefully so they would last longer. "Do not eat more than 3, she used to snap when Brandon and Sophie were little. "These are expensive." But somehow now there were hundreds of them stacked under professional lighting while I sat in a freezing apartment wondering if I should unplug my microwave to save money. It is strange the things your brain notices when your heart starts breaking. I noticed the velvet ribbon on the staircase banister, the catered shrimp display on ice, the fact that my mother had hired an actual bartender. Then Brandon swung the camera toward the living room, and there she was, my mother, Linda Reyes, smiling brighter than I had seen her smile in years. "Everybody say Merry Christmas," Brandon shouted. People cheered. My mother raised her champagne glass. "Best Christmas in years," she laughed. I think something inside me went very still after that. Not angry at first, just quiet, like my body did not know how to process what I was seeing. Because this was not really about a party. It was about realizing I had been carefully excluded from my own family while still being useful enough to pay their bills. That pattern had started long before Christmas, long before Brandon's live stream accidentally exposed it. Growing up, Brandon and Sophie were always treated like they were fragile little stars, orbiting around my mother's attention while I became the dependable one before I was even old enough to drive. Brandon got baseball camps, expensive sneakers, and second chances every time he screwed something up. Sophie got dance lessons, new phones, and emotional rescue missions whenever she cried. Me? I got responsibilities. Camila's mature. My mother used to say proudly whenever relatives asked why I babysat instead of going to football games or school dances. She understands sacrifice. I was 13 the first time she left me alone with overdue utility notices spread across the kitchen counter while she drove Brandon to a tournament 3 hours away. "There is frozen pizza in the freezer," she said while putting on lipstick near the front door mirror. "Make sure Sophie finishes her homework." "What if the electric company calls again?" I asked quietly. She paused for half a second before grabbing her purse. "Just tell them I will handle it Monday." Then she left. I still remember sitting on the kitchen floor that night, listening to the refrigerator hum while Sophie slept upstairs and Brandon played baseball under stadium lights somewhere across the state. I remember staring at the red final notice letters, because even at 13 I understood we did not really have enough money. But somehow there was always enough money for Brandon's travel fees, enough money for Sophie's costumes, enough money for everybody except the quiet daughter who never asked for much. By 16, I had my first part-time job at a grocery store. By 18, I was helping with rent. My mother cried the first time I handed her half my paycheck. "You are saving this family," she whispered while squeezing my hands across the kitchen table. I believed her. That was the dangerous part. I believed every word she said because children are wired to believe their parents love them equally. But looking back now, I can see how carefully my role had already been assigned. Brandon was the dreamer, Sophie was the sensitive one, and I was the emergency backup plan everybody assumed would always stay available. The live stream kept rolling while memories hit me one after another like cold rain. Brandon walked past stacks of wrapped presents taller than the coffee table. Sophie appeared beside him wearing a silk green dress I recognized immediately because she had texted me 3 weeks earlier saying she could not afford winter clothes this year. "Camila would die if she saw this setup," one of Brandon's friends joked from somewhere behind the camera. Brandon laughed. "Trust me, she is probably sitting home organizing receipts or something." Everyone laughed with him, even my mother, and right before Brandon ended the live stream, I noticed something sitting beside the fireplace that made my chest tighten all over again. a white envelope with my name written on it in my mother's handwriting, unopened, like somebody had planned for me to be there once and change their mind. I stared at that envelope beside the fireplace until Brandon ended the live stream and the screen went black. My reflection appeared faintly on my phone screen after the video closed. Dark apartment, tired eyes. Ramen untouched on the coffee table. Outside, snow drifted slowly past the window, while somebody in the building across from mine hung warm white Christmas lights around their balcony railing. I kept thinking about the envelope, my name written in my mother's handwriting, not thrown away, not hidden, just left there like somebody had changed plans at the last second. I do not know why that hurt more than the party itself. Maybe because for one stupid second, I wondered if my mother almost invited me, almost chose me. But then I remembered her voice on the live stream. She would not fit this crowd. The worst part about betrayal is how small the real moments sound. Nobody screamed at me. Nobody slammed a door in my face. They just quietly built a celebration without me and expected me to keep paying their bills afterward. My phone buzzed again around 10 o'clock. Sophie. I almost ignored it, but answered anyway. "Hey," I said. Silence for half a second. Then, "You saw the live stream, did you not?" Her voice sounded nervous in a way I had never heard before. I leaned back slowly against the couch cushions. "Looks like Christmas was not canceled after all." "Camila," she sighed. "It was complicated." I laughed softly before I could stop myself. "Complicated? Mom thought it would hurt your feelings if you came." That sentence sat in the air so long I could hear the refrigerator humming behind me. "My feelings?" I repeated quietly. "You mean seeing my own family celebrate Christmas?" Sophie lowered her voice. The guests were mostly Brandon's friends and some people from Mom's realtor group. Everybody was dressed up and... She stopped. "And what?" I asked. Another pause. "Mom said you would probably feel uncomfortable." There it was. The real answer hiding under all the excuses. Uncomfortable. Because I did not look successful enough. Because I rented a tiny apartment and worked freelance bookkeeping jobs, while Brandon posted filtered gym selfies online, pretending he was launching businesses every 6 months. Sophie tried to keep talking, but my mind drifted backward to the first time things started changing between me and the rest of my family. I was 27 then, working full-time at a tax office downtown while taking online accounting classes at night because I could not afford graduate school. Most nights I came home after 10 exhausted enough to fall asleep in my work clothes. Brandon still lived at home back then. Sophie floated between apartments with different boyfriends. My mother constantly stressed about money. Collection notices piled near the coffee maker. The roof leaked whenever it rained hard. One February afternoon, my boss called me into his office right before closing. "Camila," he said, adjusting his glasses while snow tapped against the office windows, "I need somebody to help manage small business accounts this season. It comes with a raise." I remember blinking at him because nobody had ever offered me something before without also asking what I could do for them in return. "You serious?" I asked quietly. He smiled. "You are the only person here who catches mistakes before clients do." I sat in my car afterward gripping the steering wheel while tears blurred the parking lot lights. Not because the raise was huge. It was only another $11,000 a year. But because for the first time in my life, somebody saw me as more than useful. That night, I stopped by my mother's house carrying takeout Chinese food to celebrate. Brandon was sprawled across the couch watching basketball. Sophie sat at the kitchen island scrolling through her phone. "I got promoted today," I said, smiling harder than I had smiled in months. "It comes with a raise." My mother looked up from sorting coupons. "That is wonderful, honey." Brandon barely glanced away from the television. "Cool." Sophie smiled politely. "Congrats." Then my mother asked, "Do you think maybe now you could help us catch up on the water bill?" I remember standing there holding the bag of takeout containers while steam fogged the plastic lid. Nobody asked how hard I had worked. Nobody asked how I felt. Within 30 seconds, my success had already become family property. That pattern repeated for years after that. Every step forward I took somehow became another emergency they needed me to solve. When I started freelancing on weekends, Brandon suddenly needed help covering credit card debt. When I paid off my car, Sophie needed rent money after another breakup. When I built enough savings to finally breathe a little, my mother's furnace died in January during a snowstorm. And every single time, I told myself family came first. Sophie's voice pulled me back into the present. Camila? She said softly through the phone. Mom did not mean it the way it sounded. I stared at the snow gathering along my windowsill. Then how did she mean it? Sophie did not answer immediately. In the background, I could still hear music and people laughing at the party. Then, very quietly, she said something that made my stomach tighten all over again. There is something Mom has not told you yet. What do you mean she has not told me yet? I asked, sitting forward so quickly the ramen cup nearly slid off the coffee table. On the other end of the call, Sophie lowered her voice even more. I could hear cabinet doors closing somewhere behind her and muffled laughter drifting through the house. Camila, maybe I should not say anything. My chest tightened. Sophie. Silence. Then finally, Mom told people you chose not to come tonight. I blinked hard. What? She said you were embarrassed because money has been rough for you lately. I stared at the dark television screen across my apartment. Embarrassed. Sophie rushed ahead nervously. She did not mean it in a cruel way. She just did not want people asking questions. Questions about what? I asked quietly. Sophie hesitated too long. About why you still live in that apartment. About work. About... She stopped again. I could practically hear her regretting every word. Say it, I whispered. Mom thinks people judge the family because of you. The apartment suddenly felt smaller, colder. Somewhere outside, tires hissed through slush on the street below, while Christmas music drifted faintly from another building. I looked down at my socks curled against the edge of the couch and thought about the $600 sitting in my mother's account right now, money I had sent less than 4 hours earlier because she claimed they were struggling. She told everybody I could not afford Christmas, I asked. Not exactly, Sophie sighed. She just said you were going through a difficult phase. I laughed once under my breath because difficult phase sounded almost funny after years of quietly carrying that family financially whenever things fell apart. Then Sophie said something that made the entire situation click into place. Mom has been trying really hard to impress people lately. What people? Her realtor friends, Brandon's investor friends, people from church. She wanted tonight to feel. Sophie searched for the word. Elegant. Elegant. My mother had spent my entire childhood clipping coupons at the kitchen table while warning us not to waste electricity. But over the last 2 years, something changed after Brandon started pretending to be some kind of entrepreneur online. Suddenly, my mother became obsessed with appearances. She started posting inspirational quotes about success. She joined expensive networking lunches she clearly could not afford. She began talking about presentation like she was auditioning for a different life. And slowly, quietly, I stopped fitting into the version of the family she wanted people to see. I remembered last Easter when one of her church friends came over unexpectedly while I was helping repair a leak under the kitchen sink. I had been lying on the tile floor in old sweatpants with a wrench in my hand when my mother walked in carrying iced tea for her guests. She froze when she saw me. Camila, she said sharply, could you maybe clean up a little before coming upstairs? I slid halfway out from under the sink. I was fixing the pipe. I know, sweetheart, she smiled tightly, but people are here. Later that afternoon, I overheard her introducing Brandon in the living room. He is exploring several business opportunities right now, she said proudly, while Brandon sat there wearing a wrinkled hoodie scrolling through his phone. Then she introduced me differently. Camila helps with bookkeeping and administrative things. Administrative things. Like I was some assistant instead of the person paying half her overdue bills. The lies kept growing after that. Family friends started asking if I was doing okay financially. My Aunt Gloria once patted my shoulder during Thanksgiving and whispered, "Your mother says this season has been hard on you." At the time, I assumed my mother had mentioned my freelance workload or stress. Now I realized something uglier had been happening for years. My struggle made her look compassionate. My small apartment made Brandon's fake success shine brighter. I was the cautionary tale standing beside the golden children. Sophie's voice cracked softly through the phone. "I do not think Mom expected you to see the live stream." "No," I said quietly. "I do not think she expected Brandon to forget the internet exists." Another long silence settled between us. Then I heard my mother's voice faintly in the background. "Sophie, have you seen the envelope near the fireplace?" My stomach tightened immediately. The envelope. Sophie lowered her voice again. "I have to go." "Wait," I said quickly. "What was in that envelope?" She hesitated. "I do not know exactly. Sophie, I just heard Mom and Brandon arguing earlier. My grip tightened around the phone. About what? About whether you should find out tonight or after New Year's. Every muscle in my body went still. Find out what? But before she could answer, another voice suddenly cut across the background, loud enough for me to hear clearly. My mother, sharp, panicked. Why is Camila calling right now? Then the line went dead. I stared at my phone for several seconds before it buzzed again almost immediately. Brandon Reyes started another live stream. My thumb hovered over the notification for several seconds before I opened the second live stream. Brandon's face filled the screen immediately, flushed red from alcohol and heat, music pounding behind him so loudly the sound crackled through my phone speaker. "Round 2!" he shouted while people cheered somewhere behind him. He swung the camera wildly through the living room again, but this time the energy felt different. Messier, more careless, empty champagne bottles crowded the counters. Wrapping paper covered the floor. My mother appeared in the background near the fireplace, talking sharply to somebody I could not see. Then Brandon laughed suddenly and pointed the camera toward her. Mom's freaking out because she thinks somebody moved her envelope. My stomach tightened. "It was right here," my mother snapped, kneeling beside the fireplace. "I left it right here." Brandon zoomed in jokingly. "Maybe Santa stole it." People laughed. My mother did not. She looked genuinely panicked now, scanning the room while smoothing one hand nervously over the front of her velvet dress. Then somebody off camera asked, "Wait, was that for Camila?" And the entire room went awkwardly quiet for half a second too long. Brandon lowered the phone slightly. "Turn that thing off," my mother hissed. But he was drunk enough to ignore her. "No, seriously," the voice continued. "I thought Camila was coming tonight." My mother forced a smile so tight it barely looked human. She decided to spend the holiday alone. I felt my chest hollow out hearing that lie spoken so casually. Like I had volunteered for this loneliness. Like I had chosen ramen noodles and darkness over family. Then Brandon laughed under his breath and muttered words that changed the entire night. "Not after the letter." My mother turned so fast her champagne sloshed onto the carpet. Brandon. His expression shifted immediately when he realized what he had said. "I am just saying. End the live stream. Now." The screen cut black so abruptly my own reflection flashed back at me again. My apartment suddenly sounded too quiet after all that noise. The radiator hissed softly near the window. Somewhere upstairs, footsteps crossed the floorboards overhead. I sat frozen on the couch staring at my phone until it started buzzing almost immediately. Mom calling. I let it ring. Then again. Mom calling. Again. Brandon calling. Then Sophie. Then my mother again. By the 6th call, my phone felt hot in my hand. Finally I answered. "Camila," my mother said too quickly. "Honey, listen to me before you get upset." I stared out the window at snow piling against parked cars below. "Before I get upset? Tonight got out of hand. You told people I chose to spend Christmas alone. That is not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" I asked quietly. She exhaled sharply, like I was the difficult one. "You know how people talk, Camila. I was trying to protect your privacy." I actually laughed at that. A small, tired sound even I barely recognized. "My privacy? You have been struggling lately, and..." "Struggling?" My voice finally cracked. "Mom, I sent you $600 this afternoon because you said the power bill was overdue." Silence. Tiny, dangerous silence. Then she said softly, "And we appreciated it." Appreciated it. Like I was some distant relative who mailed a sympathy card instead of the person quietly holding their finances together for years. "What was in the envelope?" I asked suddenly. She stopped breathing for a second. I heard it. "What envelope?" "The one by the fireplace with my name on it." More silence. Then movement in the background. Somebody whispering. My mother lowered her voice immediately. "It was nothing important." "Then why were you panicking over it?" "Camila, please do not do this tonight." "Do what?" I whispered. "Act crazy because you got caught lying?" The words landed harder than I expected. My mother inhaled sharply. "After everything I have done for this family," I closed my eyes immediately because there it was, the script she always used whenever she lost control of the conversation. Guilt first, accountability never. "No," I said quietly. "After everything I have done for this family." Complete silence on the line. Then my mother's voice changed completely. Colder now, tighter. "You are being selfish." I looked around my tiny apartment. the flickering tree lights, the unpaid freelance invoices on my laptop screen, the empty ramen cup cooling beside me. Selfish. "I think I need to go," I said. "Camila, wait." But I hung up. The messages started seconds later. "Brandon, you are overreacting." "Sophie, please answer, Mom is crying." "Mom, we need to talk before you misunderstand things." Another message from Mom appeared 30 seconds later. Then another. Then another. Emails followed too, long emotional paragraphs about family and stress and misunderstandings. One included a photo of me at 16, standing beside the Christmas tree holding Sophie when she was little. Subject line: "Remember who loves you." I stared at that photo for a long time because even then, I looked more like somebody raising the family than belonging to it. Around 1:30 in the morning, the calls finally slowed down. The apartment became completely silent, except for the radiator and distant traffic outside. I curled up on the couch, still wearing my sweater and socks, because the room felt colder than ever. My phone sat face down beside me, buzzing one last time against the cushion before going still. And for the first time in my life, I realized something terrifying. If I stopped answering, nobody in that family actually knew who I was anymore. The apartment smelled faintly like cold noodles and burnt dust from the radiator when I woke up the next morning. Gray winter light leaked through the blinds in thin stripes across the floor, and for a few seconds I forgot what day it was. Then I saw my phone. 43 unread messages, 12 voicemails, missed calls stacked down the screen like falling dominoes. My chest tightened before I even unlocked it. The first voicemail was from my mother at 1:52 a.m. "Camila, please pick up. You are making this into something it is not." The second came 20 minutes later, her voice sharper now. "You embarrassed your brother tonight." Another one at 2:31 a.m. Crying this time. "I do not know why you are punishing us." Punishing us. I sat on the edge of the couch staring at the blinking voicemail icon while snow slid slowly down the fire escape outside my window. Nobody had asked if I was okay. Nobody asked why I spent Christmas alone. They only cared that I stopped cooperating with the version of me they preferred. I stood up eventually because the apartment was freezing. The hardwood floor burned cold through my socks as I walked into the kitchen. My refrigerator hummed loudly in the silence when I opened it. Half a carton of almond milk, mustard, leftover rice already drying around the edges. I closed the door again without eating. Around 11 that morning, Sophie showed up unannounced. 3 soft knocks against my apartment door. When I opened it, she stood there wrapped in a cream-colored wool coat with snow melting in her hair. She looked exhausted. Guilty, too. "Mom does not know I came," she said quietly. I stepped aside without answering. Sophie walked slowly into the apartment, looking around like she had never really seen it before. Most people never did. The tiny kitchen table pushed against the wall because there was no room for 4 chairs. The secondhand bookshelf with chipped corners. The space heater beside the couch that rattled whenever it turned on. My tiny tree still blinked unevenly near the television. Sophie stared at it for a second too long. "Camila," she whispered, "did you really spend Christmas Eve here alone?" I folded my arms tightly across my chest. "You were at the party, you tell me." She looked down immediately. "It was not supposed to happen like that." "Then how was it supposed to happen?" Sophie sat carefully on the edge of the couch. "Mom thought if you skipped this year it would avoid tension." I laughed softly. "What tension?" Sophie rubbed her hands together nervously. "People ask questions about you." There it was again. Questions. Like my existence had become some embarrassing family rumor they needed to manage carefully. "I work 60 hours a week," I said quietly. "I pay my bills. I paid hers too." Sophie looked up quickly. "I know." "Do you?" I asked. "Because last night everybody acted like I was some broke relative they hid upstairs." Her eyes filled immediately. "It was not like that." "Then why did Mom tell people I was struggling?" Sophie opened her mouth, then stopped. Finally, she whispered, "Because it made Brandon look more successful." The room went completely still after that. Even the radiator stopped hissing for a second. Sophie stared at her hands while tears gathered in the corners of her eyes. "Mom thinks Brandon is finally connecting with wealthy people," she said quietly. "She thinks if he marries into money or gets investors. So she made me the failure in comparison." Sophie did not answer because she did not need to. I walked to the kitchen sink and stared out the tiny frosted window above it. Across the alley, somebody carried boxes of Christmas decorations back into storage while their little kid chased snowflakes in oversized boots. A normal family. Normal morning. My throat tightened unexpectedly. "Do you remember Dad's last Christmas?" I asked softly. Sophie looked up immediately. Our father had died 8 years earlier from a heart attack 2 weeks after New Year's. He was the last person in that family who ever looked at me like I mattered without conditions attached. Sophie nodded slowly. "You stayed up all night wrapping presents after he got sick," she whispered. I swallowed hard. Mom cried because she said Christmas was ruined. I remembered it clearly now. Me sitting on the floor wrapping dollar store presents while Dad slept in the hospital. Brandon complained because his gaming console was late. Sophie cried because one gift bag ripped. And my mother sat at the kitchen table staring into cold coffee while I quietly held the entire holiday together at 26 years old. That was the moment my role became permanent. Not daughter, not sister. Support system. Sophie wiped her eyes quickly. "Camila, there is something else." I turned slowly toward her. She reached into her purse with trembling hands and pulled out a folded piece of paper. This was inside the envelope by the fireplace. My stomach dropped immediately. "What is it?" She hesitated before handing it to me. I unfolded the paper carefully. At first, I did not understand what I was looking at. Then my eyes landed on the account balance printed near the bottom. $48,000. I stared at the number while my pulse thudded heavily in my ears. The electric bill had never been overdue at all. I kept staring at the account balance long after Sophie left my apartment. $48,000 sitting in my mother's savings account while she cried to me about overdue utilities and accepted my last $600 without hesitation. The paper trembled slightly in my hands because suddenly every conversation from the past few years rearranged itself into something uglier. Every emergency, every tearful phone call, every guilt trip about families sticking together. Outside, snow continued falling softly across the alley while my tiny apartment stayed painfully quiet. Sophie stood near the door, pulling on her gloves slowly like she was afraid to leave me alone with the truth. "I should not have shown you that," she whispered. I folded the paper carefully and placed it on the kitchen table beside my unopened mail. "No," I said quietly. "You should have shown me years ago." She lowered her eyes immediately because we both knew she could not argue with that. Before leaving, she hesitated again. "Mom says she was trying to protect the family image." I looked at her for a long second. And what exactly was I protecting? Sophie opened her mouth, but no words came out. Then she left. The apartment felt different after that. Not dramatic, not explosive, just empty in a way I had never allowed myself to notice before. Like somebody had quietly removed the last excuse keeping me emotionally tied to that family. I spent the rest of Christmas Day cleaning my apartment. Not because it was dirty, because I needed movement. I washed dishes that were already clean, folded blankets twice, organized old receipts into folders while jazz music played softly from my laptop speaker. Around 4 in the afternoon, my phone lit up again with another call from my mother. I let it ring. Then Brandon texted, "Mom is really upset. You are making this worse than it is." I stared at the message while wiping down the kitchen counter slowly. Worse than it is. Like being humiliated, lied about, and financially manipulated for years was just some unfortunate misunderstanding. I did not answer him either. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise out of habit. The sky outside my window was still dark blue, streetlights glowing against fresh snow. For the first time in years, nobody had texted asking me for money overnight. No emergency, no guilt. Just silence. I made coffee slowly and sat at the tiny kitchen table wrapped in a sweatshirt while steam curled from the mug between my hands. Then I opened my laptop. Not family accounts. Not overdue bills. Mine. For years I had been treating my bookkeeping work like survival instead of what it actually was. A business. I had 12 consistent small business clients already. 2 restaurants, a landscaping company, a dental office, 3 independent contractors. I knew their taxes better than they did. I knew payroll systems, cash flow patterns, quarterly filings, debt restructuring. I had spent so many years quietly solving everyone else's financial disasters that I never stopped long enough to notice what I had built. Around 8:30 that morning, my phone rang again. "Mom." Declined. Then another call immediately after. Declined. Then a voicemail notification. I almost deleted it without listening, but something made me press play. "Camila," my mother said sharply, dropping the emotional performance completely this time. "I do not know why you are acting like this, but you are embarrassing the family now." Brandon's friends saw the live stream comments this morning. I leaned back in my chair slowly. Comments? People are asking questions. Of course they were. Somebody had screen recorded the live stream before Brandon deleted it. Overnight, clips spread online. Nothing huge. Just enough for mutual friends and church people to notice contradictions. One comment read, "Thought y'all were broke though?" Another said, "Why did Camila pay the electric bill if Linda threw a luxury party?" Tiny cracks spreading through the image my mother worked so hard to create. "Camila," my mother continued, voice tightening, "you need to answer Brandon and explain this misunderstanding before people get the wrong impression." I stared out the window at snowplows crawling slowly down the street. Then I asked the question I should have asked years ago. "What impression were you trying to give people about me?" Silence. Long enough to become an answer itself. Finally, she sighed. "You always take things too personally." I closed my eyes briefly because that sentence had followed me my entire life. Whenever I was hurt, I was sensitive. Whenever I noticed unfairness, I was dramatic. Whenever I asked questions, I was difficult. "I cannot help you anymore," I said quietly. The silence on the line turned sharp instantly. "What does that mean?" "It means I am done paying for people who are ashamed of me." "Camila," her voice cracked now, but for the first time it sounded less emotional and more frightened. "You are overreacting." "No," I said softly while looking around my tiny apartment. "I think I finally reacted the correct amount." I hung up before she could answer. Then I opened a blank spreadsheet and started organizing something I had never seriously planned before, my own company. By noon, I had registered a business domain name. By evening, I had my first consultation scheduled with a restaurant owner, referred by one of my existing clients. 2 weeks later, I moved my folding card table beside the apartment window and turned it into a real workspace. Nothing glamorous. Cheap lamp, secondhand office chair, sticky notes taped along the wall. But every morning after that, I sat there building something that finally belonged to me, instead of rescuing people who only remembered me when they needed saving. And sometime during those quiet winter mornings, while snow piled against the fire escape outside my window, something inside me started changing too. Because for the first time in my life, I was no longer surviving around my family. I was building without them. And none of them understood yet how dangerous that difference was about to become. 3 months after Christmas, my apartment no longer smelled like instant noodles and radiator dust. It smelled like coffee, printer ink, and the vanilla candle I lit every morning before opening my laptop at 6:30. The folding card table beside the window was gone too. In its place sat a real oak desk I bought secondhand from a law office downtown that had gone out of business. It still had tiny scratches along one corner and a faded coffee ring near the keyboard tray, but to me it felt more expensive than anything my mother displayed at her party. Because I bought it myself. The first thing clients saw when they walked into my apartment now was the small brushed metal plaque mounted beside the desk, Reyes Financial Consulting. Underneath, smaller letters read, Small Business Accounting and Recovery Services. I must have stared at that sign 100 times the week it arrived. Not because it was flashy, because it finally made my life feel real. By March, I had 23 clients, mostly small businesses at first, restaurants drowning in payroll confusion, contractors behind on taxes, a family-owned bakery trying to avoid bankruptcy after rising supply costs nearly wiped them out. Every morning, I sat at that desk in soft gray sweaters with my hair pulled back and solved problems people trusted me to handle, quietly, carefully, the same way I had always solved problems. The difference now was that nobody in my family benefited from it anymore. One rainy Thursday afternoon, I stood in the back office of Romano's Italian Grill, reviewing inventory reports with the owner, Tony Romano, while dishes clattered in the kitchen behind us. "You are telling me we are losing almost $4,000 a month just from supplier overcharges?" he asked, staring at the spreadsheet. I nodded. "Your seafood vendor raised prices 4 times in 11 months because nobody renegotiated the contract." Tony rubbed both hands over his face slowly. "My last accountant never caught this." "Your last accountant only filed paperwork," I said calmly. "I look for leaks." He stared at me for a second before laughing softly. "You know what your problem is, Camila?" "What?" "You are too calm when you say smart things." I smiled before taking another sip of burnt restaurant coffee. Those little moments started happening more often after that. Clients introducing me proudly during meetings. Business owners asking specifically for my advice. People listening when I spoke instead of looking past me towards somebody louder in the room. One afternoon in April, I arrived at a small business networking luncheon downtown, wearing a navy blazer I bought on clearance and silver name badge clipped neatly near my shoulder. Camila Reyes, founder. The word founder almost embarrassed me at first, like I had not earned it yet. But when I checked in at the registration table, the woman organizing the event smiled immediately. "Oh, you are the accounting consultant Tony Romano recommended." I blinked. "He talks about me? Half the restaurant owners here do," she laughed. "Apparently you saved his business." Saved his business. The phrase followed me all afternoon while I sat through presentations and exchanged business cards with people who looked directly at me when they spoke. Nobody asked if I was struggling. Nobody introduced me as somebody helping with administrative things. By summer, I hired my first assistant, a 22-year-old accounting student named Leah, who wore oversized cardigans and color-coded everything with terrifying precision. On her first day, she stood inside my tiny office space, balancing a cardboard box of office supplies against her hip while staring at the filing cabinets. "You built all this yourself?" she asked. I looked around at the cramped room. 2 desks, printer humming near the wall, whiteboard covered in client deadlines, coffee cups everywhere. "Pretty much," I said. Leah smiled slowly. "That is actually kind of incredible." I turned away quickly, pretending to organize paperwork because compliments still made me uncomfortable. Years of being treated like the least impressive person in every room does something strange to your nervous system. Even success feels temporary at first. But slowly, quietly, confidence started replacing survival mode. I stopped apologizing before speaking during meetings. I raised my rates. I opened a business savings account separate from my personal one and watched the numbers grow each month instead of disappear into family emergencies. And the strangest part? My phone almost never rang anymore. No emotional midnight calls. No fake crises. No guilt. Just occasional messages from Sophie checking in carefully, like somebody approaching a wounded animal. My mother stopped contacting me completely after February. Brandon only reached out once to ask if I could take a quick look at tax problems connected to one of his failed business ideas. I never answered. Then, one Friday evening in early September, while rain streaked against my office window and Leah packed up for the weekend, my receptionist buzzed my desk. "Camila? Yeah? There is a woman here asking for you." "Client?" "I do not think so." Something in her voice made me look up immediately. "What do you mean?" Leah hesitated. "She says she is your mother." The room went completely still around me. Outside the window, headlights reflected across wet pavement while downtown traffic crawled through the rain. I slowly set down my coffee cup because suddenly, after 9 months of silence, I knew exactly what was happening. Something in my family had finally fallen apart again. Leah looked nervous, standing beside my office door, while rain slid down the windows behind her in slow, crooked lines. "Do you want me to tell her you are busy?" she asked carefully. I sat frozen for half a second, with my hand still resting near the keyboard. 9 months. 9 months without hearing my mother's voice in person. 9 months without being treated like an emotional ATM machine. And somehow I still felt 12 years old every time she appeared unexpectedly. I stood slowly and straightened the sleeve of my blazer. "No," I said quietly, "it is fine." But my heartbeat had already started climbing before I even walked down the hallway. My office was small but clean. Soft gray walls, warm overhead lighting, framed certificates near the reception desk. The gold lettering on the glass door downstairs still did not feel completely real to me some days. Reyes Financial Consulting. I remembered how embarrassed my mother once acted when people asked what I did for work. Now clients waited 3 weeks for appointments. Funny how quickly value changes once other people recognize it first. I spotted her immediately through the reception area. My mother sat stiffly on the edge of the leather waiting chair with both hands wrapped tightly around her purse strap. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically, just diminished. The expensive confidence she wore during that Christmas party was gone. Her hair was pulled back too quickly, mascara faintly smudged under one eye like she had been crying or exhausted or both. She stood the second she saw me. Camila. Hearing my name in her voice again, after all those months, felt strange, familiar and distant at the same time. I stopped a few feet away, instead of hugging her. Mom. Silence stretched awkwardly between us while Leah quietly disappeared into the back office. My mother glanced around the reception area slowly, the framed business licenses, the client awards near the wall, the coffee station stocked with branded cups carrying my company logo. This place is. She paused carefully. Nice. I nodded once. Thank you. Another silence. Rain tapped softly against the windows while traffic hissed outside on wet pavement below. Finally, she swallowed hard. You look good. It almost made me sad hearing how surprised she sounded. Why are you here? I asked gently because neither of us had enough energy left for pretending anymore. My mother gripped her purse tighter immediately. I need to talk to you privately. Every instinct in my body tightened at once. Not because I was afraid. Because I recognized that tone. Emergency tone. Family crisis tone. The tone that always arrived right before somebody expected me to clean up a mess they created themselves. I led her into my office anyway. She sat carefully in the chair across from my desk while staring at the nameplate near my monitor, Camila Reyes, founder and principal consultant. Her eyes lingered there for a second too long. You really built all this yourself? She asked quietly. I sat down slowly. What happened? She looked down at her hands immediately. No compliments, no acknowledgement. Straight to the disaster. Some things never changed. It is Brandon, she whispered. Of course it was. I leaned back slightly in my chair while my stomach sank anyway. What did he do? My mother inhaled shakily. His business failed. I almost laughed because Brandon had launched so many fake business ventures over the years that the sentence barely narrowed anything down. Crypto consulting, luxury fitness coaching, real estate flipping, online investment seminars. Every 6 months there was another logo, another podcast microphone, another carefully filtered social media announcement pretending success was already happening. Which one? I asked quietly. The development project. My chest tightened slightly because I vaguely remembered hearing about that one from Sophie months earlier. Some commercial property investment involving borrowed money and wealthy friends Brandon desperately wanted to impress. My mother stared at the rain outside before continuing. He owes people money. How much? She hesitated. A lot. I stayed silent long enough that she finally whispered the number. $180,000. The room went completely still around us after that. Even the soft humming printer outside my office suddenly sounded distant. Mom, I said carefully, how is that even possible? Her eyes filled immediately. He thought the deal would close. With whose money? Another pause. Too long. Dangerous. Mom. She looked down at her lap. Some of it came from family accounts. My pulse slowed instead of speeding up, that cold kind of calm that arrives right before terrible understanding. What family accounts? She pressed trembling fingers against her forehead. Camila, what accounts? I repeated quietly. Tears slid down her face now. Real tears this time. After your father died, she whispered, there were investments. Something inside me shifted instantly. My father's investments. The accounts he used to talk about late at night at the kitchen table while balancing checkbooks under yellow lamplight. Mom, I said slowly, what does Brandon have to do with Dad's money? She looked at me then, really looked at me for the first time in years, and I knew before she even answered that whatever came next was going to change everything all over again. My mother could not hold eye contact with me anymore. She stared at the rain sliding down the office window while twisting a tissue slowly between her fingers until it tore apart in her hands. After your father passed away, she said quietly, there were investment accounts set aside for the family. I stayed completely still behind my desk. I could suddenly picture my father sitting at the kitchen table again, glasses low on his nose, highlighting numbers across legal pads, while old jazz music played softly from the radio. He used to joke that spreadsheets were his version of gardening. If you take care of things early, he always told me, life gets less expensive later. How much money are we talking about? I asked calmly. My mother swallowed hard. There were several accounts, retirement funds, insurance payouts, investment portfolios, and Brandon had access to them. She nodded once without looking up. Eventually, something cold settled into my chest then. Not shock exactly, recognition, because suddenly years of strange conversations started making sense. Brandon always acting wealthier than he really was. My mother obsessing over appearances. The constant pressure to keep me looking small while Brandon looked successful. It had never just been emotional favoritism. There was money attached to the fantasy. Dad left that money for all of us, I said quietly. Yes. Then why was Brandon using it for business deals? My mother finally looked at me. Because he convinced us he could grow it. I almost smiled at how absurd that sounded now. Brandon could barely commit to a gym membership longer than 6 months, but somehow they trusted him with family investments. How much did he lose? She pressed trembling fingers against her forehead again. Almost everything. The office suddenly felt too warm. I leaned back slowly in my chair while rain continued tapping softly against the glass. And you are telling me this now because creditors are involved. There it was, the real emergency. Not guilt. Not reconciliation. Consequences. Mom, I said carefully, what exactly do you think I can do here? Her eyes moved around my office again, the organized shelves, the framed certifications, the clean financial reports stacked beside my monitor. For the first time in my life, I watched my mother truly see me. Not the quiet backup daughter, not the embarrassing family member hidden from guests. A professional, someone competent enough to rescue them. Again, you understand finances better than any of us, she whispered. I let the silence stretch between us because she needed to hear how different that sounded from the woman who once introduced me as someone who handled administrative things. Brandon made bad decisions, she continued carefully, but he is still your brother. Did he know where the money came from? My mother hesitated too long. Mom, yes. I looked away toward the rain-dark city outside my office window because anger would have been easier than what I actually felt. Exhaustion, deep exhausting clarity. Brandon knew exactly what he was gambling with while posting fake luxury online and letting our mother pretend I was the struggling child. How much was supposed to be mine? I asked softly. My mother froze completely. Camila, how much? Her voice dropped almost to a whisper. Your father divided everything equally. I closed my eyes briefly. Equal. The word echoed strangely in my head because nothing in that family had ever truly been equal. Not attention, not opportunities, not protection, and apparently not inheritance either. So while I was sending you money for electric bills, I said slowly, Brandon was burning through Dad's investments. Tears filled her eyes immediately. We thought he could fix it before anyone noticed. I laughed softly under my breath because that sentence perfectly summarized my entire family. Ignore reality. Protect appearances. Sacrifice the reliable daughter quietly in the background if necessary. My mother reached across the desk suddenly. Camila, please understand. Your brother was under pressure. I stared at her hand resting near my keyboard. French manicure. Diamond bracelet. The same bracelet she wore at that Christmas party while pretending they could not afford utilities. And what exactly was I under? I asked quietly. She pulled her hand back slowly. Silence filled the office. Outside the glass walls, I could see Leah pretending not to look toward my office while organizing files near the printer. She knew enough to understand something serious was happening. My mother wiped her eyes carefully. I know we hurt you. The sentence sounded rehearsed, fragile, late. No, I said softly. You used me. Her face crumpled slightly because for once I was not cushioning the truth to make her comfortable. Camila, do you know what the worst part is? I continued calmly. It is not even the money. My mother looked up slowly. It is realizing all those years you were embarrassed by the only person actually keeping this family stable. The room went completely still after that. No shouting, no dramatic explosion. Just truth sitting between us too heavy to move around anymore. My mother looked at the plaque on my desk again, founder and principal consultant. Then at the framed article hanging beside the bookshelf from a local business magazine featuring my company's expansion earlier that summer. Finally, she whispered something so quietly I almost did not hear it. Your father said this would happen someday. My pulse slowed instantly. What? She stared at me with red, tired eyes. A month before he died, he told me. Her voice broke. He told me one day everyone would realize you were the strongest person in this family. And somehow, hearing that hurt more than everything else combined. My mother sat across from me for several seconds after saying it, staring down at her hands like she regretted the truth the moment it left her mouth. Outside my office window, rain continued streaking the glass in soft, crooked lines, while traffic lights reflected red and gold across the wet street below. I could hear Leah moving quietly near the printer outside my office, pretending not to listen. "He really said that?" I asked softly. My mother nodded once. "Your father worried about you." I almost laughed at the irony of that. Everyone worried about me when I was useful. Nobody worried about me when I was lonely. "He knew you would spend your life carrying everyone else," she whispered. "He used to tell me you never asked for enough." Something in my chest tightened unexpectedly because that sounded exactly like him. My father noticed quiet things other people missed. He used to leave $20 bills under my notebooks during finals week because he knew I skipped meals when stressed. He always remembered which coffee creamer I liked. When I got my first bookkeeping job at 19, he framed my tiny employee name tag and stuck it on the refrigerator like I had won an Olympic medal. Nobody else in my family understood small forms of love like that. My mother wiped beneath her eyes carefully. "Camila, I know I cannot fix this." I stayed silent because we both knew some damage changes, shape permanently after enough years. But Brandon is in serious trouble. There it was again, the real reason she came. Not reconciliation, not regret, fear. "What exactly does he owe?" I asked calmly. My mother inhaled shakily. "Private investors, personal loans, credit cards. There are legal notices now. And he wants me to solve it. He thinks maybe you could help negotiate." I looked at the framed certifications behind her instead of answering immediately. Certified Financial Recovery Specialist, Business Debt Consultant. Funny. My entire career now revolved around cleaning up financial disasters created by emotional decision-making. Maybe that was inevitable after the family I grew up in. "Camila," my mother continued softly, "he is ashamed." I finally looked back at her. Was he ashamed while pretending I was the broke embarrassment of the family? She flinched slightly. "No." "Was he ashamed while using Dad's investments for fake luxury projects?" Another pause. "No." "Then this is probably the first honest emotion he has had in years." The room went quiet again after that. My mother looked older sitting there than I remembered. Not physically older. Just tired in a way expensive clothes and curated social media photos could not hide anymore. "You hate us now," she whispered eventually. I shook my head slowly. "No." And surprisingly, I meant it. Hate required energy I no longer carried. What I felt was clearer than hate. Distance. I spent a long time thinking if I worked harder, gave more, stayed quieter, eventually you would all love me the same way I loved you. My mother lowered her eyes immediately. "Camila, but the truth is," I continued gently, "you were comfortable with me sacrificing myself because it made life easier for everyone else." Tears slipped down her face again. "I did love you." "I know," I said softly, "just not carefully." That sentence seemed to break something in her expression because for once she had no defense ready. No guilt speech. No excuses about stress or family pressure. Just silence. My office phone rang suddenly near my elbow, sharp against the quiet room. I glanced at the caller ID. Brandon Reyes. My mother looked up immediately when she saw his name. "Please," she whispered, "at least talk to him." I let the phone ring twice before answering on speaker. "Hello?" Heavy breathing on the other end. Then Brandon's voice, rough and exhausted. "Camila." I leaned back slowly in my chair. "What do you need?" Silence stretched for a second. "Mom told you everything?" "Enough." He exhaled shakily. "Look, I know things got ugly." Ugly. Such a small word for years of manipulation. "You humiliated me for years," I said calmly, while spending Dad's money pretending to be successful. My mother closed her eyes immediately. Brandon stayed quiet long enough that I knew the truth finally sounded ugly even to him. "I screwed up," he admitted quietly. "Yeah," I said, "you did." Rain tapped harder against the windows while nobody spoke. Then Brandon asked the question I think everyone in my family assumed they could still ask eventually. "Can you help me?" Not "how are you?" Not "I am sorry," just "can you help me?" I looked around my office slowly. The business licenses. The client files stacked neatly beside my desk. The company I built alone after they decided I was not polished enough to belong beside them. No, I said softly. Complete silence on the line. Even my mother looked stunned hearing it spoken out loud. Brandon swallowed hard. Camila. I hope you figure it out. I continued calmly. I really do. But I am not sacrificing myself to protect people who only value me during emergencies anymore. His breathing changed slightly then. Like somebody realizing a door they always assumed would stay unlocked had finally closed. So that is it? He asked quietly. I thought about Christmas Eve, the live stream, the laughter, the envelope near the fireplace, my mother calling me selfish while taking my money. No, I said softly. That was it. Then I ended the call. My mother sat completely still across from me while the dead silence settled between us, and even though I finally felt strong enough to protect my own peace, part of me still mourned the family I kept hoping existed underneath all the damage. My mother left my office quietly that afternoon. No dramatic goodbye, no final argument. She stood near the door for a second like she wanted to say something else, then simply nodded once and walked away holding her purse tightly against her chest. I watched through the glass as she disappeared down the hallway, under the soft office lights, while rain continued falling outside. The strange thing was, I did not feel victorious after she left. I felt tired, like I had finally put down something heavy I carried for so long that I forgot what life felt like without it. A few weeks later, Brandon sold his luxury SUV. The investment project collapsed completely. Some of his friends disappeared. The second the money disappeared too. Sophie told me he moved into a smaller apartment across town and stopped posting motivational business videos online. My mother eventually sold the house, not because she was destitute, because maintaining the image became impossible after everything cracked open. The giant Christmas tree room with the velvet ribbon staircase and catered parties disappeared from all her social media by spring. Sometimes Sophie still updates me quietly over coffee every few months. We meet at a small cafe halfway between our neighborhoods, where the tables wobble slightly and the waitress always refills coffee before asking. Sophie looks calmer now too, older somehow, more honest. Last month, she stirred cream into her coffee slowly and said, I think Christmas was the first time any of us realized you could actually leave. I looked out the cafe window at people carrying grocery bags through cold October wind before answering. I did not leave, I said softly. I just stopped abandoning myself to stay useful. Neither of us spoke for a minute after that because some truths need silence around them to settle properly. My business kept growing after everything happened. Nothing flashy, nothing dramatic, just steady, real. The kind of success built quietly over time, instead of performed online for strangers. 2 years after that Christmas, I moved into a larger office with exposed brick walls, warm lighting, and windows overlooking the river downtown. Leah still works with me. Now she runs half the client meetings herself while drinking iced coffee year-round, no matter how cold Wisconsin gets. Last winter she hung tiny white lights around the office windows in December, and for the first time in years, Christmas did not make my chest hurt. Sometimes healing looks very small at first. A peaceful morning. A locked phone with no emergency messages. Buying groceries without secretly calculating who else might need your money later. Learning that love should not feel like permanent exhaustion. I still think about my father sometimes when I stay late at the office, especially during snowstorms. The building gets quiet after 6 o'clock, and the city lights reflect softly against the river while my computer screen glows in the dark office. A few months ago, while organizing old documents, I found the tiny employee name tag he framed for me when I was 19. The edges are worn now, the plastic cracked slightly near one corner, but I keep it in the top drawer of my desk, beside my business license, because it reminds me of something important. Some people see your value long before you learn how to protect it yourself. And if you are listening to this story right now while feeling invisible inside your own family, I need you to hear me carefully. Being needed is not the same thing as being loved. Sometimes people will praise your sacrifices while quietly depending on you to stay small enough to control. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is stop rescuing people who keep handing you the role of emergency backup instead of treating you like a human being. Protect your finances. Protect your peace. Pay attention when your body feels tired around certain people all the time. That exhaustion is information too. I used to think setting boundaries meant becoming cold or selfish. But now I think boundaries are how you teach your soul it deserves safety too. And maybe God, or the universe, or whatever quiet force watches over broken people, sometimes removes you from tables where you were only invited for what you could provide. Not to punish you, to show you there are still rooms waiting where you do not have to earn your right to belong. My name is Camila Reyes. I am 34 years old, and the core lesson I want to leave with you is this. Never confuse your ability to survive mistreatment with proof that you deserve it. Thank you for sitting with me through this story. Truly, I know there are people listening right now who feel lonely in ways they cannot explain out loud. Maybe you are the dependable child too. Maybe you are the one everybody calls during emergencies while nobody asks if you are okay. I hope this story reminds you that your worth is not measured by how much pain you can carry quietly for other people. You are allowed to build a life where peace does not have to be earned through suffering. And if this story stayed with you tonight, I would love for you to leave a comment sharing where you are listening from, subscribe to the channel, and stay connected with us here. There are so many stories like this that never get spoken out loud until someone finally feels less alone hearing them. And honestly, some of the next stories we are sharing might hit even deeper than this one. There is another woman whose family only remembered her after she disappeared completely from their lives, and another story about a daughter who uncovered the truth behind her father's hidden will years after everyone thought the money was gone. If this story touched something in your heart, I think those stories will too. Until next time, take care of yourself gently.